Welcome to Expedition Self on OMTimes Radio with lifelong learner, entrepreneur, and creator of the worlds of Expedition Self, Sam Parrotto. Sam shares 4 decades of studying, guiding, and teaching how to go inside so we can build an incredibly powerful, dynamic, and validating relationship with the self. Expedition Self is laced with stellar, unexpected insights about what it means to be human. Listen now and ignite your self-development process with Sam Parrotto.
Well, hello. You're listening to Expedition Self Live, and I'm Sam Parrotto. So this is a live show, and it's designed to have people call in and talk about the growth process and what it's like to live in your skin. But actually, I just want to give you a heads up today is that it's very possible you may not get through. We're having some tech attack things going on where they've messed with the system for calling in. So I'm going to give you the number, but I just want to say when you call in, if you get a busy signal, I would just give up. It means you're not going to get through. But I am actually hoping you'll give it a shot because it's a big subject today. So here's the number. It's 202-570-7057. Remember, if you call in and it's busy, it probably means you're not getting through, that it's been blocked for that, for us to be able to receive callers. So, okay, I'm going to take some deep breaths here because today's show it's really being driven by my sense that we are in such a new time, probably a time that we've really never experienced before, that requires a totally new understanding and shift in the way we go about relating and connecting. And so it's important to me that we distinguish it so that our heads can, begin to get wrapped around what actually is different. Now, I do think we've experienced little pieces of what's going on, but I don't think at any point in our world have we ever seen it really in every corner, at every angle, right, in every dimension that we touch. So let's see. So the thing about the brain, right, is that it's intrinsically a closed system, like running around a track. You could insert new trees or different weather or change scenery, but essentially it's the same track. So when a change is afoot, it's one thing to live through it, but it's an entirely different thing, really, to get your head wrapped around it. I think about my ex-husband took like 6 years to actually come to grips and accept the idea that he was really in a relationship with me. And I have lots of more examples of how long it takes for the mind to actually realize that something has changed. So, gosh, here we are in a polarized society. The vaccine, the environment, your political position, your views on women's rights, or on Black Lives Matter. From where I sit, every family and friend group and circle of colleagues is in some way dealing with differences that seem, I think, a lot of times impossible to reconcile. And these differences they're heated, right? They're fueled by real life experiences and examples that generate like fear and hate and rage and disappointment and just so much intensity. So we're going to talk about how to close the gap through my lens, which has everything to do with going inside and working at the level of being, right? Which is all that stuff that you think about, feel, and experience on the inside of you. And hopefully you'll be able to connect not only with your own insides, but actually gain a more robust view of what's going on for those who you are circled by, right, as well. So if you get anything out of my show today, I would like to think you'll have a bit more understanding of what it's actually going to take for you to close these gaps with those people that you love and share life with. But first, I want to talk a little bit about one of the core ways of being that I think lives inside all humans. And that's the need to draw towards others, to collectively gather in oneness, to find some way, find a path to connect and to align. And I realize that it may seem like there's lots of people who are loners or try to stir the pot or constantly play devil's advocate as a way to disconnect people. But I believe that all of that is even a response or a reaction or an attempt in some way to find this connection with others. So I think about it this way, right? I am me. I love growth work. I hope that's come through in all my shows. I think there are vast worlds to uncover in tapping into the unconscious that we haven't even begun to understand. I want people to experience the beauty and amazing complexity within themselves and to bring a self-responsible, self-expressed, creating quality, right, to each and every moment. I love to be irreverent and unpredictable, and I like to instigate unexpected life that results in like some surprise vitality. So you're going to probably wonder, why did I just go through that? It was not an advertisement. It's, what do? I teach it. I speak it. I'm in the conversation about it all the time. I would like to think I model it by studying and practicing and experimenting and questioning it. So why do I do this? Well, it's because I want you to come and be with me in my world. That's it, right? If you're in my world, I will feel less lonely. I'll claim more of a sense of oneness and connection because you in some way are getting me. You're with me. You're aligning some way because it resonates for you, right? So all of us are always really trying to influence others to come be with us, which I'm saying is on top of how much we actually deeply want connection. It's pretty much what I watch in every single meeting I attend or every family that I share the dinner table with, is that they're looking for a place where they align and coalesce around some common idea or belief. So the child who is funny and likes to laugh and make jokes is looking for others to get their humor, to share in it with them, to maybe even try it out themselves. Or think of it this way, like the business person who thinks return on investment, also called ROI, is an important concept, right? They're looking for the team that she works with to recognize the significant impact it can have on their goals, right? It's again, to be in oneness with them, to have that person feel, that businesswoman, to actually feel like someone's getting in her world and understanding it. Or the person who believes that art would make life better, that it would open pathways for people if they engaged in it, right? All that creativity, that that person is looking for others who share in their love of art and are willing to try it so they can come into the same brain space and have a shared heart about art. I rhymed. Being needed and wanted. So let me say it as clearly as I can. You are you, and you are looking to draw people to your take on the world, because when you do, you are aligning and feeling connected and joining and gathering with them. And that feeds us at an incredibly core human imperative that we live by. It's deeply, deeply validating and supportive when this happens. And it provides a level of security that we can't really get any other way. So as human beings, we need this. And every moment of our lives, we're enrolling and engaging people in what we love so that this happens without even realizing it half the time. And over the last 50 years, I'm just going to kind of keep weaving this story around how we close this gap, right? Because we want to lay some foundational pieces here. So we've been developing our sense of what we love, right? Opening up to having a self and basically filling out the self-actualization section of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Learning about ourselves and how we can be more fulfilled and feel more love for ourselves and each other. And while we did that, we shared more and we connected more and we helped each other do the same by being open to what they were all about and asking them to be open to what we were all about. But here's the problem. We can't do that anymore. because there's so little agreement on how the collective world we live in should function. Even if you agree about the vaccine, you likely won't agree on how we handled Afghanistan. If you see Black Lives Matter similarly, then you might not agree on the vaccine. And our so-called two-party system is making it even more challenging because you're caught between this or that or the other. So I'm going to add to this. We're in a super, uber, not understood, challenging mental health time because we've just come through this unplanned, unprecedented, throw out your sense of security and connection, life-altering experience that we've really yet to fully even begin to get our head around. So remember what I said about how long it takes to realize what we've actually lived through, right? It's definitely at work right now. So we're unsettled underneath our feet. Things that we used to think made sense in our heads, they don't now. And our relationships are altered because everyone is scared and angry and reactive, concerned, and feeling, powerless to some extent or another. And of course, anything emotional or psychological, being-wise, that we didn't work through from our lives and childhoods is now collapsing or merging with the now, right? That makes sense. Anything that we could kind of skate over the top of or work with because we could handle the external stressors, well, now it's just all too much. It's bubbling up from the past. It's happening in the present, and it's exponentially, bombarding us with inner material that many likely have been able to keep under wraps and compartmentalized up to this point, but now has a path to make its way to the surface, of our awareness. I mean, people are sitting at the family table and finding it difficult to talk about their differences because they quickly escalate into someone feeling alienated or outraged, right? Or offended. Or at the other end of the spectrum, we've got the topics, quote unquote, not to talk about list, which pretty much means we're trying to work on top of this not together space that I'm talking about. Is this happening in your world? Are you actually finding yourself in these same scenarios that I'm finding myself in? And is it distressing you like it's distressing me? Because, the byproduct is we're not able to come together. We're not modeling how to deal with differences for our children and the mental issues in our country, the mental health issues in our country, the use of addiction as a way to offset this hemorrhaging of unresolved emotional issues. I mean, suicide for many age groups is at an all-time high. There's more violence. And, we're further away from agreeing on anything than at any other time. Oh, and let's not forget, we've got more elections coming to help us further polarize politically. Sheesh. It's worrisome and heartbreaking all at the same time. And activating, right? And of course, you can't just spend time with the people that you feel most comfortable with, right? Because that'll make the divide wider, even though that's very possibly what you most want to do. But if you gravitate to people who think like you, then the circles of your families and your associates in your community who don't think like you will separate further. And truly, in 10 years, where does that leave us as a society, as a community, as a family? So I say all this because it makes the point. We've got to do something different, and we've got to be the source of what can make it different. We have to be the source of what can make it different. We are who we are individually. We have to be the ones that step in and speak and open space and create conversation. Because when you think about it, families aren't going to let some stranger come in and be controversial or cause real vulnerability and opening. And of course, this adds to the problem because Everyone is on social media claiming to have some truth, making some statement, promoting their position as a way to bring others towards them. But really, there's no truth anymore. It's an impossible situation. There is only each person's truth, and helping them begin to realize that they can stay connected and we can stay connected with them. The only truth we're left with is knowing who we love, knowing we can love, and remembering what it means to love someone because they breathe, not because they agree with us. And ratcheting up our our citizenship know-how and beginning to find ways to meet people where they are is all important. So this is what today's show is all about. The closing of these gaps between us and those we love. Because if it isn't you who will do it, then who? If it isn't you who will do it, then who? So, when we come back from break, we're going to dive in a little further about how to close this gap inside of all these differences we now find ourselves in.
A conscious lifestyle for a mindful life. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
OMTimes magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organisation, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. Connect at omtimes.com. OMTimes, creating a more conscious lifestyle.
My name is Victor Furman. Some call me The Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio, and we'll explore these topics and so much more on Destination Unlimited.
Coping-19, brought to you by CDC and the Ad Council.
If you're feeling increasingly lonely right now, you're not alone. It's totally normal. Even though we may not be able to get together in person, connecting virtually with friends and family still gives you a chance to interact with people and may help raise your spirits. Join a virtual book club, set up group text chats, or online video coffee breaks with coworkers.
Find more self-care and coping tips at coping-19.org.
All right, we're back at Expedition Self, and I'm Sam Parrotto, and I have to say I'm pretty impassioned about today's topic because I really feel like we've all got to start taking it more seriously, that we've got to be the ones stepping into the center of the disagreements and the intersecting points, right? So before we went on break, I said, if it isn't you, who will do it? Right? If it isn't you, who will do it? And I think that's the piece, is we have to realize that if we're somebody who actually cares about the connection and how we're all operating in the world, we can't just separate ourselves out and go to the other side of the river. We have to actually get over on the side of the river that isn't where we stand and start creating bridges. So, all right. I also, normally this is a call-in show, but we're having some trouble today. So if you are trying to call in and it's busy, just know that you're probably not going to get through, but you're certainly willing to give it a shot. I'd love it if you gave it a shot, which is 202-570-7057. I went to the dentist today, so I have to say that, you know, when you go to the dentist and they rework a tooth, all of a sudden your mouth doesn't recognize itself. And so every once in a while, a word doesn't quite form the way it's supposed to. So bear with me if that happens again. So, all right, let's start at the top of this predicament. Guess what's right at the top? You, right? So here's the thing. In order to be that person who steps in, you have to get in touch with where you only see your viewpoint, where you feel right, and where you come from a rigid place and where you want others to come to your side of the river. And you have to really get in there and look at what has brought you to this point. And so this is where it gets a bit more dicey, because I'm not saying you don't get to have a viewpoint or that it's not valid, but I am saying that you can't come from a place of it being right. It's just yours. So in many ways, you'll need to start seeing your viewpoint as less important in some ways than you do right now, because that importance kind of moves it right up and over the hill and into right. So when I say this, I'm thinking you might be having a reaction inside your belly about that. Like, what? I just spent all these decades developing my voice, my right to have a voice, to validate and value what I feel strongly about, right? To get self-empowered, to find my truth and be authentic about it. And you're telling me, that's me, Sam, that I'm supposed to now be seeing my viewpoint as less important? Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying, because it's the only way that you're going to bridge, right? The only way you can do that is to tie your life experiences that are forming your opinions to the opinions, right? To realize that they're personal, they're not global, and they ultimately don't pertain to anyone but you. Now, I'll say this again. Everything that you think and feel is a byproduct of something you have felt. And everything that you have felt forms your thought in response. So your opinions have opinions. I'm popping my P's, I think, today. So you have to realize that everything that's going on for you and your viewpoint is really personal. And even though you can make it global, you can take it outside yourself and overlay it over life and everything that happens in life. If we're going to be those facilitators in the center, if we're going to cause movement, what we really actually have to keep remembering is, in this place, it only pertains to you. It's about you, and it's your truth, but it isn't the truth. Right? So you might have unresolved pain about them because you were able to manage and compartmentalize. See, I told you this was going to happen. Compartmentalize them until now. And that's what's fueling the emotion behind your opinions. I'm kind of going down a path here to help you see that all the stuff you think and feel has come from experiences in your life. And it's helped to formulate where you stand about it so that you can think about where do you get right about it and rigid. Maybe you had an experience within your high school days, right, that bring up the race issue for you. Maybe you've lost someone to COVID. And of course, that brings you to a very different place than someone who hasn't. Maybe your son or daughter or relative are in the military and have lost a friend because of the way the U.S. has handled things. Or your sister lost her business because of the shutdown. This is my point. You didn't just form an impassioned opinion out of the blue, out of the clouds, and pluck it out, right? You formed it because something touched your heart that mattered to you, and it's activating, and you are now working from that place. So we have to get in touch with it. We got to feel it. We got to work with it. And then we've got to really get thoughtful about not projecting it out into the world as if it's the right opinion, as if we are in the right, as if it's the only way to see it. Do you know, I hear people call others names like idiot and moron and stupid in their conversations about these very topics. And beyond that, what I'm hearing a ton of is this deep concern and worry about where we're headed because somebody else doesn't see it the way that person does. Wow, I'm just going to keep taking breaths here because, to me, if we're going to redirect this ship we're on, we're going to have to start with ourselves and realize that our emotional real life experience is getting amplified, right? And then we take it and place it out in the world and turn it into this ideology that looks real to us and right to us. Right? That everything that's going on inside of our own experience, our own thoughts and our own feelings is formulating these opinions that we've got, and we're using them to put out in the world. And when we do that, we're creating a divide without even realizing we're doing it. And it's not because we don't care. It's because, right, we have our own stuff going on, our own experience that's valid and real. But we really need to stop amplifying it in a way that creates separation, right? We have to stop looking for more proof to keep the charge going. And we instead have to go inside and actually feel the pain and grief about what is true about being human. That we do suffer. We do experience loss. We're not in control of a whole lot of stuff. We are in control of some things, like who we're being, right? We do feel powerless and lonely, and life is scary. And these realities have to be embraced for us to stop fueling the drama through the power of our own psyche and imagination. You see, you got to remember, projection, right? It's the way for the human psyche to get whole. And projection leads to blaming. Let me just put that in here, right? Holding other people responsible. But it's the way for the human psyche to get whole when it can't deal with what's happening on the inside of the self and actually process emotions and actually feel the sensory material that comes with engaging in life. So we're not gonna redirect it inward unless we take a stand to redirect it inward and see it for what it is. I'm hoping this makes sense, right? We have to take a stand to say, I'm going to own this as mine, but I'm going to make room for other people to actually have a space, even if it goes against everything that I feel strongly about. So I'm going to say this again. We're not going to redirect it inward unless we take a stand to redirect it inward and see it for what it really is. And that's what I'm saying, really, is that we're fueling the drama because we're in our own, and it looks very believable and right, and we can be very unconscious to its origins. And the only way to stop fueling it is to actually be with what's real and what is so about being human and what is true, really true about our personal human experience that deserves our attention and our care. So, why does this matter so much? Right? I mean, I don't know what's going on in your head over there, but you could say, why is she going on and on about this? Well, it's because in order for us to start closing the gap, we have to have our own inner world about things somewhat settled, or at least organized, so that our feelings and our experiences aren't going zip, 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 randomly flying off the walls at the very moment that we're trying to build a bridge. These unexpected times. And the key word in that, you might have lost it because I was zipping over there, is randomly, right? I'm not saying you won't be activated all the time, but the key is to be a container for all of that activation so you can hold the space for closing the gap, right? So, okay, now that we've gotten this far, let's talk about the next step. The next step has to do with wanting to understand the same in someone else's world. The same as what I just talked about. All that stuff I want you to get your arms around. This is about actually wanting to understand all that for someone else. What experiences have they had that formed their opinions and their reactions and their rage? And not just knowing what it is, but actually giving them a chance to delve into it because you're interested, because you want to share in the sharing of where did it come from. And to really be interested in who that person is and why they have landed where they are. right? Because what often happens is when someone thinks something different than us, we write it off so quickly. We categorize it and put it on a little label and go, oh yeah, I know what that is. We don't want to ask more questions because it's painful to hear them, like the responses. And yet that's what it is going to take, is to open it up. And honestly, sometimes the person you're talking to, they're afraid to open it up. They only have the 3 sentences they say about it. They haven't even spent any time in it, which is very likely true. But we have to love people again for being people, not for what they believe. So to do this, it means we have to truly fortify our need to harmoniously align with others, because you're walking out on a plank that has no harmony. You're actually saying, I know it doesn't have any harmony. I absolutely am going to get out here. I know I'm going to be activated. I know I've got stuff going on, but I am intentionally going to be somebody who starts closing the gap. You're walking there fully knowing that you don't agree, but the mission is a worthy one, because you're leaving your safe, righteous place and beginning to build an inroad into someone else's territory. And you're not doing it to win them over to your side, which is super hard because you're going against your instinct, right? Remember I talked earlier about how we're always trying to move people towards us, right? So in actuality, to say, I'm going into the middle of this, not to move them to my side, but to create connection. You're really kind of turning yourself upside down, right? You're hanging upside down like the hanged man. And the thing I just really want to say at this moment is, and you're doing it to grow for yourself, because I can tell you that when you get out there knowing you don't agree, when you leave your safe, like righteous place to begin to build inroads, you are doing that growing edge, take the risk, expand who you are kind of thing. And that's the real reason. That's the real payoff. That's the real driver for all this, is that by you growing, you're causing the world to shift. And you're doing it to create unity through the disagreement, which is building this muscle. It's like going to the gym, like being able to be whole and connected, even though there's disagreement. I'm going to just slow down here for just a second. I'm hoping this is kind of making some sense to you, because really for you to get in the center of that, for you to actually cross the river, for you to become the person who's standing in the intersection, it means you're going to have to develop more of who you are to handle it. I was in my car the other day and I was making a left-hand turn. The next thing I know, there's a policeman 2 cars ahead of me, and he puts his lights on and he literally walks right out into the middle of all this traffic. I mean, there's like cars in every direction and there's green lights going on. He didn't even turn the light off. And I don't know, he picked up something and walked back in his car, and I thought, that's what we're talking about. It's like we are walking into the middle of traffic. And we have to be able to hold up for ourselves. Whether we agree on the topic or the point that somebody's making, right? It's ultimately unimportant, because you're placing an emphasis on building the bridge again, making it safe for people to see the world in different ways, and then laying the foundation for new kinds of conversation and new options. And the real great part is you're making it safe for you again, too. So I want to reiterate about how this might look, because it can't be contrived or condescending, right? That's why we have come to it with our own angst. I'm sorry, I didn't say that right. That's why we have to come to it with our own angst and troubles and our own discomfort. And dare I say, the big word of the 2000s, vulnerability. Right? We have to bring that level of exposure to it, but we're bringing it with a very big consciousness so that we can put what matters into the space, but not need to win the day or be right about it. or even lose ourselves to the processing of it, which might happen, because then our ability to hold the space for the other, it's lost for them. And of course, it's lost for us. Now, when I say all of this, it's all practice, right? So you're not going to go snap your fingers and you walk out and you're like, woo, I am going to be part of the creating of something new. No, you're saying I am going to learn how to do it through practice. Because we know that practice, it produces an energy about it, and it produces its own vulnerability that is palpable to everybody around us and mostly to our own hearts. So, you see, as long as we stay polarized, our options are slim. And this polarization, there's a big hiccup here. Because, okay, get ready, I'm going to go inside right here. It's that we're polarized inside of our own mind. Because remember, the right and wrong perspective that you blanket over your own life, that comes out of your own experience, the separation between your intellect and your emotions, that dichotomy between doing and being polarized, it's the human condition. It's the real and personal match for any person you're talking about. So you want to be completely in touch and appreciating the humanity in it all, both yours and theirs. That's right? I'm saying they are you and you are them, not in the material or the content that they're using or to fill in the blanks, but in the way we're relating to it, right? The places where we think we're right, the places where we are split down the middle, where we decide there's a good guy and a bad guy. We have to remember the humanity in it all, right? And you have to remember that that's what's coming up from inside of you. Okay, time for another break. And when we come back, we're going to go another layer.
The best of holistic, spiritual, and conscious world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free. AscendingHearts.com.
Imagine yourself being transported to India, to the banks of the Ganga and an ashram in Rishikesh. Visualize that you are welcome to satsang with an American sannyasi who shares the wisdom of her guru. Your visualization has manifested. Join Sattvi Bhagawati Saraswati for inspiration and transformation every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio.
If I could be you,
and you could be me,
for just 1 hour,
if you could find a way
to get inside
each other's mind.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
We've all felt left out. And for some, that feeling lasts more than a moment. We can change that. Learn how at belongingbeginswithus.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Okay, we're back. I'm Sam Parrotto, and this is Expedition Self, and we are talking about how to close the gap in the world right now and in our own lives with the people that we love around all of these places that we can't agree anymore. So I'm actually saying that the only way we close this gap is to start to work against our natural internal thinking process that's inside of that closed system, that race, that track I kept talking about that we're running around. Right? The duality of one or the other, rather than all the variations in between, and begin to stop playing as one distinct side of the polarized space. Right? You have to be the one willing to do this, because we can't wait for someone else to bring it, because then we're just powerless and victims of a very challenging time. Which, by the way, this in and of itself will make us angrier. and angrier, right? There's nothing we humans like less than to feel powerless. Absolutely nothing. I think even loneliness doesn't get the reaction that powerlessness does. So I'm saying that by continuing to stand in a righteous place about how you see the circumstances and events playing out right now without recognizing that they're tied to painful and difficult experiences in your life, you can't actually go engage and occupy another person's world. And when you can't do that, then the gap won't close because you're the one with the power to close it and you're not using it. All right, so polarization is a no-win situation, right? And that part of you that needs to win, everybody has it. So I want to go in a little bit more on polarized situations and what that means. So it means that there's a good guy and a bad guy, that there is someone who is right and someone who is wrong. It's this scenario in our heads when there's an interaction and one person's the aggressor and the other is passive. And it looks like the aggressor was wrong and the passive person was innocent. It can easily progress where it looks like someone has more power and someone has less, which leads a lot of times for us to feel like something's being done to us. And that's the victim mentality in a nutshell. So in truth, we human beings are so much more complex than this. But for the most part, we just haven't worked through this as a society, right? We're all too willing to blame someone for our pain rather than look at how we're participating in it. We're very busy not being wrong. And we buy into the idea that we're powerless because as we were growing up, power, let me see if I can say this in a way that kind of slows it down. Power was being used all over the place in ways that left us feeling powerless or as if something was being done to us. But there's a big difference between feeling powerless and victimized and being that. But our psyche is just trying to work it out. So a lot of the times it isn't worked out yet. And we're still left in that polarized, powerless, helpless, victimized paradigm in both big ways and lots of little ways that we're likely unconscious to. So I'm going to go down memory lane for just a minute. I remember when I saw this stuff for myself the first time. I was revisiting a memory with my stepfather and the events that led to it. And I was describing what he did and what he said and the scenario that led to it. And then I went over his words and I could picture myself standing there. And then I was able, for the first time, really, to actually connect and notice what was going on for me in my body. I didn't have words to describe it. I just knew what it felt like. And I couldn't speak. I realized I was really scared at that moment and there were no words to come out. And then it was like I saw his actions in that moment and realized I didn't take any action. That moment when I realized I was locked up inside was me not being able to use the power I actually had to speak or to act, to move. I did feel helpless, and he looked towering and overpowering. And when I turned that flashlight on what I was feeling, I realized that it wasn't his actions that made me feel powerless and victimized. I mean, there was a lot to feel about that, but it was my feeling of it happening at the time that he was doing what he was doing. This is the spot that most of us don't get to because we leave these moments in our head and think about them as movie clips and stories rather than connecting on a totally body, sensory being level on the inside. At that moment, I actually was feeling powerless when he was doing what he was doing. But it doesn't mean I didn't have power. Doesn't mean I didn't have my own power. And it doesn't even mean that I could have used my power, but I had it. But if this isn't connecting like immediately for you, I'll bet you know someone in your life who just can't be wrong. They just can't, deal with the idea of being powerless. They can't admit that they're sorry or off in some way. And I'll bet you see that they use their power to dominate or avoid situations. The ones that they themselves are causing. Because it's so much easier to see this stuff in others until we actually intentionally connect it within ourselves. Again, this is why I say that if you want to close this divide, you got to go inside. It's a great rhyme, huh? So this polarized, powerless, victimized space sounds like I may have done that, but what you did was much worse. I didn't have a choice. or they go talk about a bunch of facts and scenarios that justify why they definitely didn't have any ability to have it go different. How unfair everything is and why their actions wouldn't have happened. So I know I'm talking about it like them, but you see, this is what's at play when we try to connect and we try to actually get in somebody else's world, is all of that stuff is going on for them, and we have to find that stuff in us. So it brings me to an important quality and skill you're going to need if you're going to close these gaps. You have to start seeing ownership everywhere. And by the way, ownership applies to being passive or retreating as much as it applies to being aggressive or dominant. Applies to thoughts that you have, because what you think totally plays a role in how things go. It applies to what you allow in your space, in your family, in your community. Ownership applies to what you know and also what you don't know and what you don't know that you don't know. So you can decide that name calling in the family isn't a big deal. But what if it is? So when you start looking at ownership for where we are right now, for your family or circle of friends and colleagues, you're going to want to look at who you have been being. What have you been thinking? What have you been dominant and righteous about? And what have you been allowing that may, in fact, be playing a role in not being able to find a unified place to talk? This is the issue. We've lost the central place to talk where we remember that the other person matters, that they deserve respect, even if we don't agree with them, and that we want to understand them better rather than tear them down or blame them for our problems and our pain. This ownership thing I'm talking about, it means you remove blame from others and you begin to own instead your feelings and your pain. It means that when you're listening to others, you don't react to their blaming. So I'm going to flip this again, because when you work through this polarization and ownership thing, then you're able to allow those words and thoughts from the other person to just melt away like warm butter while you're busy building that bridge, because experientially you can handle it. And then their material isn't bouncing off of yours as much. Think of it like being in a thunderstorm and you're actually building a bridge outside. Each block has to get put into the foundation while the water is flooding over and deluging you. I never can say that word very well. I even looked it up to see how to say it and I still couldn't pull it out. Anyway, it makes it hard to see, right? You keep slipping as you walk across the ground. This is what building the human bridge with others will look like right now. And if you're busy blaming and operating from this, that there's a good guy and a bad guy, your inner powerlessness isn't really claimed and acknowledged by you, you're going to have a heck of a time building a bridge to them, because you'll just put the cement block down and go back to your territory and say, this is a mess, to your domain, to your community, where it looks like everyone is, dare I say, more harmonious. And the water, will wash away all of your progress because the sand in between each block, right, slips away and then the blocks don't hold. Let me remind you, even in your community, it's likely people aren't agreeing as much anymore, and that the relationships are taxed and challenged. All of our nerve endings are just sticking out, so it's not going to be easy to make inroads unless you understand how far we've got to go to get to a level starting place. At this point, just in the last 10 years, people have built a whole new slew of stories to support their position and set of issues. Confirmation bias, baby. Whatever we have decided is true for us is what we'll collect in our life experience. So you're definitely working this with this when you attempt to close the gap. So this gap I keep talking about, it's in your very closest community, the family you feel most aligned with. And then it expands from there like circles, right, going out. Because the next set of people you spend most of your time with, they're going to need a bridge too. I hope it's coming through that I'm saying that the building of the bridge is more important than what you move across it. That the blame and polarization, the taking of sides, these things get in the way of your ability to explore, be interested in, and learn and empathize with and facilitate openings. This is what it's all about, being a facilitator now. What matters is not where you stand and the position you take about the topic or the point, but the position you take on behalf of the relationship and the person and the community, our shared citizenship and the family. It's the position you take so that people in your sphere of influence don't feel marginalized and start to develop a sense that they can be safe in any conversation, even if they're the worst offenders of blaming and projecting their personal pain into trying to be right. Okay, so let's take a breath here. Did you get what I was just describing? It's that you might find that people you're trying to build a bridge will turn on you. It's an important point to bring up about, because if you've known people for a long time, they have an opinion about who you are and why you're talking to them or wanting to close this gap. And it's likely going to be the first place they'll go if they're resistant to trying to find a common foundation, right? You're just talking about this because you're upset about what happened last Christmas. Or I don't want to talk about how I see COVID because you're just trying to change my mind again. Yeah, you've built a listening for who you are up to this point. And people are absolutely going to pull it out when you start moving in. So there's some stuff here for you. Not that you are wrong or shouldn't want to close the gap, but be able to get in their world and think about and understand how they relate to you and own it. So I want to put the words in here. I can see where the way I have blank, blank, blank has had you feel blank, blank, blank for these reasons. This is why it's super important to get transparent and vulnerable about what you're wanting with people. You know, last week when I was talking with you, it just bothered me so much that we couldn't actually engage about the environmental stuff without it breaking down. I don't want that for us. Okay, that was a little quote. If you missed that, right? So let's go over what you have to bring to the table to close this divide I'm speaking about. First is a willingness to look inside at your own experience, to feel what's there, to heal what's past, to truly claim your life so you can stand in it without competing to win. Second is to look at the need to be right seriously and be willing to create room for others to be listened to and heard and be right themselves. Third is this ownership thing I'm talking about. Recognizing that you have been in relationship with this person or group for a while and that they can have a preconceived notion about you, and owning how it's gone for you and for them and doing it in a way that they're not on the hook for anything that's happened. This is super important, right? And then also owning your own experience so that you're not in that victim-y space. All right, remember that people want to be connected and aligned, so they're looking for a way to find their way back to each other, even if it doesn't look like it. And you're building a bridge of conversation and relationship, not of agreement. The fourth piece is being willing to go the distance. Not the, oh, I gave it a shot and it didn't work, and, right? In the going of the distance, you're willing to hold back judgment and assessment. You keep dropping deeper and deeper into the bridge between you and them and focusing on that and reaching for it, right? Because we're connected, because we're human. I want this connection, and so I want to keep letting my rigid, closed system melt away and seek the intersections between us. And you can't look at it as a result or a win. That's what I mean about going the distance. You have to see it as the process at work, the place where you engage and you invest and you create as much opening as you can, even if you run into a wall. And know that there's always another moment. You don't let yourself get mad at them for being them. And if you do, then there's work to do, because you can see you're getting attached again to having it go the way you want. The fifth piece has to do with remembering that there's more working on each person at every minute of the day than we realize. Other people, other scenarios, other guides, the unconscious self. So no one of us has to do the whole of the work. We just have to start to create a safety in talking about what we don't agree about that's been missing for a long while. Lots of people are backed into a corner and they don't really have the skills to find their way back to the center. So you're that guide. You're working on yourself. You're the person holding that space to help reveal what's possible, but it's not all on you. And the sixth piece is to remember that the flashlight has to stay on you. and your learning and your personal discovery, not on how much you moved them or how successful you were in closing the divide. This immediately will put you in a superior and condescending position, and truly, it's not how it's really going. Because right now on this planet, if we all knew how to bring ourselves the way we imagine we would if things were different, then things would be different and we wouldn't have the divide. So we're on our own growing edge. We're learning things ourselves, and we're learning through conversation about how to deal with the powerlessness and helplessness when we come up against another's rigidity and crustiness and unwillingness to budge. And we come up against our own, right? You see this powerlessness stuff, it's all around us. I normally read a poem at the end of my show, but this week I'm going to just put it on my website, which is samparrotto.com, because it's kind of, and I think it's very perfect for what we're actually talking about today. It's all about wearing masks with a little bit of a little play on that. So I want to thank you for being on the planet with me. At this time, interested enough in who you are as a human being to care about building bridges, finding intersections, and working to close the divide among your group, your people, your community, and your family. I so appreciate you listening to today's show so very much. And I wanted to encourage you to write me at hello@expeditionself.com. I'd love to hear about your community and what you're doing and your own work to step into the center of the divide. Thank you so much.